Hi, everyone. This is Charles from Watch Charts, and I'm joined by Hamza in a little bit of a different format of a style of content today for you guys. Because I was looking sort of at the market data yesterday, and I just noticed something that's pretty interesting that's happened in the market just within it seems like the last month or so. And so what's happened is it seems like we're seeing on forums from private parties and dealers that operate on forums that the first stainless steel professional sports models from Rolex are starting to be listed below retail, and it's specifically coming from the Rolex Milgauss reference 116400 GV with the black dial, which is the one that trades for lower than the Z Blue, which is the blue dial that everyone loves. But this watch has a retail price of $9,150. It's been in production for a really long time. I believe since like 2009. And what we're seeing on the forums from reputable sellers, which we define as sellers with at least 10 positive feedback from transactions within the past year or so, is that this watch is now being listed for as low as what we're seeing is $8,200 against a current retail price of $9,150. And then this is a 10% discount below the retail price compared to all the other professional steel sports watches from Rolex that we have in this table here that you can see. This is really the only one which we're seeing a significant discount. Basically, every single other one, the Sea Dweller and the Explorer, those are sort of the less desirable professional models. Those are sort of right. The minimum on the forums is,
Relatively speaking,
yeah,
less desirable.
right, relatively less desirable compared to like GMT Masters and Daytonas. But those are sort of right around retail at the lowest forum price. But this is solidly 10% below retail, and again, these prices have just started reaching these low levels within the past couple of weeks. Previously, roughly all of these watches are around like 1 year lows. Previously, we haven't seen this type of pricing since like basically the end of last year or maybe like middle of last year.
I had to
And
speak up in defense of Explorer owners, but I also wanted to interject with a somewhat sort of associated observation, which is that the reason the retail price level matters is because it's a psychological barrier or threshold for the market, and always has been for objects that we've talked about this in great detail elsewhere, so I won't repeat that here. But for objects with little to no intrinsic value, once they're being traded on the secondary market, retail price serves as a very important point of reference. And so, for something like a Rolex stainless steel professional watch to drop below that level represents, I think, something important that's happening in the market, certainly from a psychological standpoint. So that's why it's relevant and important to talk about this comparison. Back to you,
right. And
Charles.
and there also is an argument here that, like because the Milgauss has been in production for so much longer, this specific reference compared to the other, current production models from the other families, there could be some bias here towards the lower end of the price range because you're looking at, watches that are potentially trading that are over 10 years old. But the ones that we're seeing, we've seen several examples. All of them are the black dial configuration, but they're like from like 2021, brand new, unworn still, with all the stickers. So it's not just like these are not just like the sort of worst examples out there that are super scuffed with no box. These are like, sort of very good condition, still modern, couple years old maximum, examples. The other thing that's interesting is that, if you look at the Rolex market index as a whole now, we're basically at an 18-month low in terms of the aggregate performance of the 30 watches that compose the index. The last time the index was this low by our measurement was around the middle of 2021, around May of 2021. And we talked about before, like last month, how we think that prices are likely to continue to drop lower, and it certainly seems like that has continued to happen. And particularly with these, like I said, Sea Dweller, Explorer, and Milgauss models, it does seem like for one reason or another they are reaching some truly like unprecedented within the past year, like listing prices that we've seen on forums. The other thing is that the Rolex supply, continues to increase. This is sort of tracked through all of our aggregate data across all the data sources that we have, and you can see that since the first signs of the market downturn in February of this year, every month after, with that month included, and every month afterwards, the number of Rolex watches listed each month from the 30 watches in the index has been higher than the number of watches sold. And so the total supply in the market, which is tracked by the blue line, has continued to increase every month since February, up to and including November, which we're about halfway through right now. And so we recorded a podcast July of this year, in which we addressed this question. Back then when the prices were still higher, will Rolex prices drop below retail? And back then, sort of Hamza and I took a little bit of an opposite stance. And Hamza said, maybe for a few models, but probably not for the bulk of that stuff. I mean, it's now basically confirmed. There are a few stainless steel sports watches from Rolex that are definitely available at sub retail prices. And then I gave more of a sort of cautionary outlook where I said maybe it could get back to the situation maybe like 1 or 2 years ago, or like 2 years ago, where it was really only the most desirable models, the Daytonas and GMT Masters, that would trade above retail, and maybe everything else would be around retail or maybe slightly below retail. So, looking back on this now, what is this, like 4 months later, I thought it was interesting to do some sort of, quick rundown of, okay, what is it that we know now that maybe we didn't know then, and sort of how's people's perception and how is what's actually happened in the market changed over these last few months. So why don't you give us some of your thoughts, Hamza?
I think for me, when I look back and listen to the answer that I gave back then, it was very heavily caveated with, oh, if this doesn't change and this doesn't change and this doesn't change and this doesn't change, then yes, prices will not drop below retail, which of course is which in some ways was a cop out to not have to take a more, I guess, strident position back then. But it is certainly true that some of those assumptions are no longer true, and prices are dropping given the overall macroeconomic outlook and everything that's going on in the world. Three or 4 months ago, and I guess this is what I've learned, is I would not have thought that it would take what it has for the perception of the market to suddenly start feeling this uncertain.
Like you're saying, you would not have expected it to happen so fast.
Essentially, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Right.
It's basically a demonstration of the futility of predicting what's going to happen in the future, right? I think the way that the market has actually changed over the last few months is basically a continuation of a lot of the trends that we've been seeing going on since earlier in the year. So in that sense, I don't think anything major has changed. But
I mean, you're far from the only person that's had this way of thinking. I mean, even like many like mainstream big names like in the space, and like financial publications have sort of speculated over the last couple months about maybe the prices bottoming out. But so far it seems like, at least for Rolex, that has not happened. Maybe we can look at the Patek and AP markets in a different video maybe, but yeah, certainly for Rolex it seems like it is still continuing to drop at about the same rate. The other thing that I think is interesting is that the community, my perception is that the community has sort of uh, gone from, maybe this uncertainty when prices first started falling. Everyone was sort of wondering like what's going on. Is it going to continue? When are prices going to stop falling? To now, it seems like, overwhelmingly, we read the comments that you guys post on YouTube, on Instagram. We read sort of the conversations that are happening on forums, and it seems like the overwhelming majority of that type of audience, I don't know if it's like an enthusiast audience or whatever, but that type of audience seems like you guys are telling us you want the prices to fall even further, and that this was not sustainable, and yeah, that basically you guys would be excited to buy watches, to buy Rolex watches once they drop below retail. And also I see that a lot of you guys are still talking about, how the retail market is still ridiculous, and maybe, that your to you guys, your definitive sign of a market cool down would be availability at retail. And that's certainly true. Everything that we've talked about in the past in this video has sort of been like caveated to within the past like 12 to 18 months, right? Longer term, obviously people have, been collecting Rolex watches for decades. Longer term, things are still very much near the all-time peak. Yeah, so let us know what you think about, sort of this different type of video. If you want to see more content like this, give us a like, give us a subscribe. Thanks so much for listening and watching, and I'll catch you guys next time.